Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Iyori Folani. It's all over the news. The spokesman of the president, has announced virtually that the presidency opposes the ban on open grazing that was pronounced by southern governors, a short while ago. And, not many people either understand or appreciate the intervention. We'll come to that subject. Also, something we need to be looking at today, there's a NGO. It's called the Human Rights Advancement Development and Advocacy Center, HUDIDAC for short. They've recently been launching reports. By their name, you know that they're concerned with human rights, but it's human rights across Africa. Our beloved Nigeria is in there, so we'll be crossing over now to our studio in Abuja, where Ayodele Amin, Executive Director of HUDIDAC, is waiting for us. Good morning, Mr. Amin.
Good morning, it's good to be here.
Indeed, thank you very much. Now, I was just introducing you, Human Rights Advancement Development and Advocacy Center, and that concerns itself with monitoring, among other things, monitoring human rights across West Africa. Of course, Nigeria is in West Africa. First of all, tell us the reports. What can we learn from the research that you have put together, especially, let me just try and be a bit specific, especially as it relates to human rights compliance and ranking in Africa, in West Africa?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Yori. One of the things we observe over time is that other different international organizations has been the institutions researching and providing a human rights status report. And we felt that there are gaps in some of those reports, and it's so extremely focused on just violation and abuses. So we decided to develop an homegrown human rights assessment report. What that means is that this report was developed by West Africans for West Africans and beyond. We felt that we should be able to look at the various layers of protection for every citizen in West Africa. And we also take into cognizance the government challenges, the institutional challenges, the civil society challenges, and the educational gaps in terms of the ordinary people. So basically, what we did is we partner with the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, who has been a long-standing human rights NGO. They have done a lot of human rights training for civil society. And we collaborated with, they are based in Gambia anyway, and we collaborated with the Campaign for Good Governance in Sierra Leone, and the Center for Citizens with Disability in Nigeria, and the network of human rights journalists in the Gambia. People like Nelson Ekujimi and Sherry Sembe from Sierra Leone also make contribution. So the report is divided into three strands. The first strand is looking at the legal framework, the human rights institutions, and the human rights processes. And we dealt with that because the whole report is 13 chapters. It's chapter 2, 3, 4, and chapter 9. So we look at the legal process, the laws, and there are interesting things that you discovered.
Okay.
For example, when we did a comparative studies.
Could I come in here, please? Sorry to interrupt. Could I come in here? Now, human rights compliance and ranking. And thank you very much for the overview you've given us. But I wanted to find out, in terms of the ranking, In West Africa, bearing in mind all that you have said already, like who is doing well and who needs to be improving cleaning up their act?
Okay, thank you, Yori. The methodology in developing the human rights ranking, and I need to add a caveat here. We only develop the human rights ranking at this stage from the promotional rights point of view, not from the protective rights point of view. And the reason for that is that for protective rights to be accommodated, we must be able to do a lot of field mission. We must be able to engage with the member state. And we must be able to validate and revalidate the cases that we have.
Okay.
So because of the pandemic, we are unable to do that. But we are able to rank states from the promotional part of human rights. What that means is that we examine how many UN treaties did they ratify. Are they members of the ICC, International Criminal Court? How many AU treaties did they ratify? There are 69 of them. How many ECOWAS treaties did they ratify? Did they obey ECOWAS judgment? Did they have a human rights commission in their country? And what is the status of that commission? Did they have office of the ombudsman? Did they even mention in their constitution human rights? Did they mention in their constitution Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a basis of law? Did they embed in their constitution the African Charter on Human and People's Rights? And when we look at this, Mali came top as the country with the most and the best human rights friendly environment. Mali and Senegal.
Interesting you mentioned Mali there. Sorry, Mr. Amin, it's interesting, yes, if not paradoxical, that you actually mentioned Mali there. Bearing in mind...
Yeah, because of the coup, yeah.
Yeah, bearing in mind the latest news coming out of Mali. but I understand that the studies...
One of the things we need to understand between promotional and protective is that promotional lay down the laws. Compliance has to do with the protection. The first thing is that you need to actually ratify a treaties before you can make a claims on it.
Okay.
By ratifying a treaties doesn't mean you implement it.
All right.
So we are just looking at their treaties idiosyncrasies.
Okay. So as you were saying...
Mali and Senegal are...
Yeah, Mali and Senegal. They are tops. Mali and Senegal are tops.
And Nigeria is in between. Nigeria have 179 score. And the worst is Cape Verde.
Cape Verde. When you said Nigeria... Sorry, sir. When you said Nigeria has 100 and a score of 100 and... what did you say? 100 and...
79, yeah, I think so, yeah.
Around 179. Out of how many possible?
Well, the highest possible that we have now, that is not the possible, the highest we have is 217.
Okay.
That is not the best score because none of the countries in West Africa are up to date with their report to the African Commission.
Okay.
Some are 2 years delay, some are 3 years. Guinea-Bissau have never submitted a single report to the African Commission. So these are kind of gaps we have found out.
Yeah.
And the other thing you need to also understand is that when we look at countries that embedded the African Charter in their constitutions, they are all French-speaking countries. None of the English-speaking countries have it embedded. In fact, only Nigeria have it domesticated. So if you look at the question of Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the rest, they didn't even mention Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They didn't even mention the African Charter in their constitution.
I see.
Okay? So it's not a grand norm. But in the French countries, they are because they are mostly monolith states. When they ratify a treaty, it becomes law locally in their country. The English-speaking are dualist states. They still need to domesticate the treaties through the normal lawmaking process.
And it becomes an act.
So these are something that needs to be
That's when it becomes law.
In the region.
An act, as a lawyer
Yeah.
beside me is saying, just in case you heard the voice, because we have another human rights activist in the studio, in the person of Malaki Ugumadu, former national president of CDHR. Good morning, Malaki. I saw that you were coming in on it.
Correct.
Did you want to make a comment?
Well, it's a topic of interest. It's an area that invokes one's imagination. First is to commend the group.
HURIDAC. Human Rights Advancement, Development and Advocacy Center.
And my colleague over there who has spoken well, particularly.
Ayodele Amin.
Yes. In doing that, I am particularly interested that a body has found the need to review the human rights situation in the sub-region. That way, you are already putting the parameters of engagement on issues of human rights amongst the member states. I think that is commendable because you are already constituting a peer review mechanism that will ultimately reinforce each other and assist them in doing better.
Okay, it's interesting you say that because switching back to Ayodele Amin, I was going to ask what can we hope to benefit, or how can we take Nigeria, for instance? How can we benefit from the research work that you are doing as reflected in what you've just told us regarding rights compliance and ranking? Who are these reports for?
Thank you. Well, the report is for, I will respond with what the UN told us when we have a consultative meeting with them. And they wanted to have an advanced copy. I said, well, tell us which chapter you are interested in. They said everything. So everything. So the report is useful for everybody. It is a report that you can use for advocacy. It is a report that is a gap analysis for states to look at where they are on the ranking table. It's a report that is useful for academic institutions to really know what are the human rights institutions and human rights framework in the region. And also, it's good for me to mention that this report is the first of its deliverable. We are also coming out with different fact sheets, which we have information on how ordinary people can claim their right with various human rights bodies, from the National Human Rights Commission to the UN. And we will have details and contact details of those bodies that you can write to if your right is being abused or being violated.
Okay.
But a couple of things we need to know.
Sure.
I will refer you to our chapter 8 and the section on insecurity, which also have a ranking, and Nigeria is topping that. And what we did is to look at insecurity from human rights perspective. We are not looking at it from security theoretical framework. We are looking at which of this country is your right to life. Possibly you can lose it easily in terms of insecurity. And we came up with about 5 indicators. One is terrorism. Terrorism will normally lead to more deaths, more loss of life than banditry, okay, and kidnapping. That will lead to more death than petty crime, okay.
But did you say Nigeria? Did you say Nigeria is tops in the category you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes, Nigerian top that as the most insecure
when
it comes to the protection of your rights
when
in
you
the
say
country.
top.
And Gambia is the most secure. And the reason for that is this, is because it's a weighted score. If you have terrorism cases in your country, then your score goes up. If you have banditry, your score is higher, not up to terrorism. So if you look at the country like Liberia, they don't have banditry, they don't have terrorism, they only have sexual violence, they only have issues with journalists. So you won't have them at that level. But the other thing the report also show you in chapter 11, when we look at the cases, is that we kind of think that when we talk of herdsmen cases, herdsmen crisis, it's a Nigerian issue. Actually, it's not. You see in the report that they have this same problem in Burkina Faso. They have the same problem in Benin Republic. When we talk of kidnapping, we kind of think that it's a Nigerian problem. No, it's not. They have the problem in Ghana, they have it in Benin, and they have, so we have all these common problems. And this is very important for us to know.
Okay.
And if you go to the chapter
sorry,
of the report,
okay, I imagine
you look at NSAS. We did analysis on NSAS, which is a Nigerian issue, because we look at local violation and global interest, and we come to 3 issues: NSAS in Nigeria, governance issue in Mali, and as well as the Kadigatu Sanko child right case in Sierra Leone. So it's an interesting read.
Indeed. How are you going to be able to deal with, for example, in Nigeria, this a lot of people will be able to relate to that, with the authorities so that advantage can be taken of this report? Or are you already doing that? It's one thing for all these data collation of all this information, a lot of hard work. So you have it now. You're even talking with the UN. But in the case of Nigeria, for example, which I imagine will apply to all the other countries that you mentioned, how are you going to interface with the authorities here so that a difference can be made? Because it's, it's not good where we are. Where we are, you say we are topping. In fact, we're very bottom, but you explained it. We're bottom of the...
You see, yeah. Now, let me make this clear that this is not a naming and shaming report. It's not like the reports of other international organizations that we say, okay, we don't care what the solution is. Yeah. So we have a 33-page recommendations for this report. And that is divided into 3 parts. You have the thematic recommendation, you have institutional recommendations that goes for the UN, the African Commission, the AU, and you have the country-specific recommendation. But what we have done so far is that we consulted this body in the process of developing the report. We explain what the report is all about. We met with the AU, we met with ECOWAS, we met with the UN, and we discussed the framework. And the whole purpose is that we want to be able to work with member states to improve their ranking. For example, in the 2021 report, so we want to be able to sit down with the Nigerian government to say, okay, these are your recommendations. How can we improve on it? And part of the process of doing that is to be able to launch a Nigerian fact sheet, possibly with the Human Rights Commission, in collaboration with them, and then we can start to develop an implementation plan on how we can, because you already understand one thing from this report. When you look at the data, we have more problem with non-state actors in terms of data analysis, not in terms of accountability or remedy, than state actors. Let's take unlawful killings, for example. In each of these countries, you have less than 20% of unlawful killing committed by security forces. More are committed by Boko Haram, kidnappers, banditry, intra-party conflict, and all this. So we have serious issue with non-state actors. We do know about the bridge of impunity, that it is the responsibility of government to make sure that non-state actors who commit human rights abuses are brought to justice. And if they fail to do so, they start to violate the rights of the people who are the victims. We know the legal framework for that. But we are saying, in terms of our investment, our technical investment, our expertise investment, our resource investment, we now need to be speaking to non-state actors. We now need to be talking to about how do we reduce this debt, and talking to states to say, look, you can't just allow Boko Haram to be killing people because you have an obligation to protect the rights and the life of these people. And it has a connotation. And also, let's
one moment, please. One moment, please.
The role of the private sector in this.
Hello, Ayodele Amin. One moment, please. I wanted to take the opportunity of him being here to hear from your colleague, Michael O'Brien Onyeka, who is also a board member of Huridak, the executive director. Michael O'Brien Onyeka, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, sir, and thanks. Very happy to be here.
Yes, you've been listening from the beginning. Would you like to add anything? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to pinpoint the human, the environmental aspect of this report. And again, that's one of the things that makes it unique. in the sense that the report takes a holistic approach, not just looking at the orthodox conception of human rights like police brutality and things like that, but also looked at indigenous groups and what I want to speak more about, which is the environmental aspect.
Okay, go ahead.
That environmental rights are actually human rights, because the right to live in a clean environment is enshrined not only in so many international laws, but also in various sections of the Nigerian Constitution and other African constitutions. But unfortunately, these sections of the Constitution that deal with environmental rights have never been fully enforced. You and I have a fundamental right as per the Nigerian Constitution to live in a clean environment, free from pollution and so on. But we haven't advanced in those countries, including Nigeria, to, for example, eliminate plastic pollution and plastic waste and so on and so forth.
Okay.
The issue of deforestation, poaching, and wildlife trafficking, which is what I would like to use quickly as a good example of how environmental issues affect other rights. So look at COVID. Two key things to note about COVID is, A, it's not a natural disaster, it's a man-made disaster. It happened because we degraded the forest that serves as natural quarantine environment for wildlife. COVID is a zoonotic disease. It means it comes from wildlife until it transmits to humans. If we didn't carry out forest degradation, if we didn't carry out poaching, and if we didn't carry out wildlife trafficking that moved wild animals from their natural environment to the cities and thereby infecting humans, we may not have COVID or Ebola or any of the SARS-related viruses. So there is a reason why, as the rate of deforestation around the world increased in the last 4 decades, we have seen a multiplication of zoonotic diseases affecting public health, causing trillions of dollars of losses in revenue that affects you and I today. There is a big link between the environment and other issues, including the rights that we should be enjoying as Nigerians or as West Africans. So the environment is also critical.
It is indeed critical, and it's an interesting point that you add as being under human rights. But in that one, you cited some examples, the pollution, plastics, and some state governments, as you know, have been making spirited efforts to advise the populace as to the dangers of their own habits. And it isn't always that peoples across the states of Nigeria cooperate with the authorities, especially as it relates to how to properly dispose of refuse. And just one infringement here, another infringement there, and by the time you know where you are, we're having infringements in their millions. It all adds up. So there's a situation here, isn't there, where the people themselves that you are agitating for are not necessarily their own best friends by their habits.
You see, if I may jump in there, you see, the approach we've been taking, which I can pick up from what your comment is that we treat environmental issues as a nice to have, rather than treating it as being fundamentally critical to the survival of the nation. It should be treated as a national security issue.
Okay.
I've just given you a good example of COVID. You know how much livelihoods and revenue has been wiped out. A lot of African countries are scratching their head thinking how they are going to survive, right? And it's a national security crisis. It's not a situation where people may or may not comply. And there are countries in Africa that have set the example. Rwanda is a good example.
Well,
they banned plastic almost 10 years ago. People thought their economy would collapse. No. Kigali is the safest, cleanest city in Africa.
Okay.
And the economy is doing really well. Kenya has done it as well.
So
why can't Nigeria do it?
And so there are lessons in there. There are lessons in there for other countries in the sub-region, is the point that you are making. Mr.
Exactly.
Mr. Amin, I don't expect you to disagree with any of that, seeing as you're both board members. Talking about Mr. Ayodele Amin now. So we go back to the question that I asked and that you had actually attempted to answer, which is, so how do we now get this report before those who are working round the clock too for many aspects of this? Whereas we're talking about human rights, fundamental human rights and all of that, the institutions, the treaties. But your colleague just made an interesting point that, look, some of the things that we're handling, the way we're handling them, it's not something where you can comply if you want or we begin to beg you. It should be a thing where the authorities are insistent on your human rights for our own common good. It's something of an uphill task, do you think?
Yes, I think you are very right and you are very correct. And one of the driving factors for this report is that we don't really have an alternative not to work with the member states in terms of what we have found for this report. Because at the end of the day, it is the member state that can improve the human rights. They are the one that ratify these treaties, and they are the only one that can violate the treaties. And there are two things we need to look at. One of the things we are trying to show with this report is that there are connectivity between human rights and corruption, between human rights, democratic rights, between human rights and insecurity. And that is actually clear in our chapter 8. Because we discovered that when you speak to states, they will say, oh, human rights is not our priority. We have big problem with banditry in Northeast. But you start to look at it. What are the causal factors to that?
Yeah.
Because cattle rosterers have to take people's cow, and there is no justice, there is no remedy, and people decide to take arms to their arms.
Okay.
So it is the negligence
was that
of
a slip
the human rights
was that a slip of tongue
that have caused that problem.
Sorry, sir. Was that a slip of tongue,
right.
or did you actually mean it when you said that sometimes you talk to state actors and you do get the response that, look, human rights is hardly our priority right now? I mean, would anybody dare say anything like that, even if that were the case? Would they dare say that it's not a priority to them?
Well, it's really not a slip of tongue, because in we make it clear at the launch that there are always this statement that we need to mainstream human rights, which means assisted suicide, which means that, okay, that is not a strand, we just mainstream it. And that has been going on for over a decade.
Okay.
And not only that, if you look at donor agency, human rights seems to be a priority to them. They have to do, we are talking about peace and security, but you can't deal with peace and security without dealing with accountability process,
Indeed.
Which is the human rights framework. Indeed. In dealing with this. So we are trying to bring with this report human rights back to its rightful place,
okay.
Which is the front of the queue.
And
that if we respect people's rights,
all right.
If we comply with the laws that we obey, if we ensure that people get justice, then people will not resort to jungle justice. People
all right, then. I want to thank you very much. I've got to interrupt you now.
Yeah.
I wanted to interrupt you, but thank you very, very much, Mr. Ayodele Amin, and indeed to Mr. Michael O'Brien Onyeka, because one thing you've added is showing the connectedness of all these issues and how one thing actually affects the other. So thank you very much, Mr. Michael O'Brien Onyeka, executive board member, I beg your pardon, of HUDIDAC, that is Human Rights Advancement and Development Advocacy Agency. Thank you very much, Mike. And also Ayodele Amin, executive director, HUDIDAC. Thank you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much. All right, then. So, interesting point, and showing the interconnectedness of these. And he stood up and said, look, it wasn't a slip of tongue. Sometimes we get the impression that government authorities are sometimes, they can actually say something like, or indicate something like, it's hardly our priority, we have much more important. I was surprised because I thought that even if that were the case, it wouldn't be a proud thing to announce. Being a person of that community yourself.
That is to tell you the nature and the character of the challenge that we have in respect of the defense and protection of human rights. Indeed, I'm not surprised that he said it wasn't a slip of tongue. As a matter of fact, and this is very, very curious, even in the enforcement of fundamental rights, those of us who are practitioners in this area will tell you we have very difficult situations. I give you a very curious experience that I once had trying to enforce the fundamental right to life of a Nigerian. And I got to court to find that there are authorities, at the moment a court of appeal authority, insisting that the enforcement of the right to life can only be by the government and not an individual. Now, that point is curious to me because it is not only the government, like you have heard him say, that violates the fundamental right of life of other people.
Unfortunately.
So you encounter such a judgment and you say, wait a minute, is it that the judiciary itself has not taken judicial notice of the violation of rights of other people? So if I ask the question, what is the right that has been taken away from the victims of Boko Haram, victims of banditry, victims of armed robbery? Was it a state department or agency that violated those rights? Certainly not. So these are issues, but we didn't leave it out there. We are confronting that situation, making further arguments to say that no, it is not in all circumstances that the rights can be taken away by government actors, state actors, and therefore the rights should be applicable to, across boards. Well, now, the other point I needed to make very quickly is to encourage them, beyond the report, beyond the mechanisms they have decided, to develop capacity to ensure that the benchmarks they have reeled out are enforced.
Indeed. And as they themselves have indicated, we've been able to gather that there's much work to be done.
Correct.
Still. Okay, stay with us, please. As I said, two subjects we wanted to look at. Next, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the presidency opposing the ban on open grazing that was signaled by governors in the southern part of Nigeria. That's when we return from the break. Stay with us, please. Okay, welcome back. It was the senior special assistant to the president, Garba Shehu, who put out the information claiming that the May 11 stance of the governors in the southern part of Nigeria, that they were going to be banning open grazing, that it might not sit squarely with the law. Now, this is something that had earlier been voiced by the Attorney General of the Federation. There was an outrage then. There is an outrage now following Garba Shehu's speaking. So much so that some have even said that they even doubt if he was speaking for the president. And some Governor Akeredolu, for instance, has said that it was the stance of the presidency, as given by Garba Shehu, was shocking and provocative, among other things. Not many people could see the whole rationale of that statement out there. So we'll look at that, and Malaki Ugumadu, as you know, is still with us. He's a former national president of CDHR, to introduce him again. He's also a legal practitioner, and I'd like you to weigh in on this subject matter, Malaki. First of all, the Attorney General, a lot of people have been making comments about the Attorney General likening the sale of spare parts to the trade of herding cattle and that kind of a thing. And now Garba Shehu has come on and, speaking for the president, has said that he's not sure that it's square with the Constitution. In other words, that it's illegal.
Well, what is the basis of the illegality or the alleged illegality? If he went ahead to pinpoint those aspects of either the Constitution or the statutes that renders those positions illegal, we'll be able to respond to him squarely. But please permit me to say that the problem I see is the level of discordant voices that attend issues that otherwise ought to gain unanimity for a government populated by this same political party. I think that is very, very instructive going forward. The governors of the southern Nigeria who met and took those positions, you had a lot of APC members there, or APC-controlled governors there. Mm-hmm. In short, the coordinator of that forum is Governor Keredolu of Ondo State, who, by the way, is a senior advocate of Nigeria, a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, and a member of the People's, the ruling party. Now, my confusion is the level of discordance. You can imagine such a person at cross purpose, in diametrical opposition with the presidency, which is APC government, and the Attorney General, who is a colleague professionally. So what that does is that it polarizes the issue from the center in a way that building a consensus around it becomes a serious difficulty. But speaking directly to the issue, open grazing has no place in modern times. What has it done? It has brought about serious security challenge in the country, where both the animals and the herders perpetrate one infraction or the other, either by way of the destruction of other people's properties to which they have rights over, or the killing of human beings, destruction of properties, and so on and so forth. What is to be done? It is that all over the world, even in countries that are known to be the best producers of cattle, talking about Argentina, even Kenya here, they have proven that ranching is just about the best way to go about breeding cattle for even commercial purposes. And what do? They secure a place as large as they can afford, make these animals even better at the point of sale, get more values from the same cattle that may otherwise would have been, spent all trekking from one part of the country or continent to another. At the end of the day, the law is clear as to our respective rights to own property, to be immune from such reckless, avoidable destructions by other people. The law gives everyone the right to move, but does not vest on those people the right to destroy and maim in the process of exercising that right.
Indeed. So there appears to be something of a confusion of issues that are just thrown together, unfortunately, to have a desired effect. And
for as long as that confusion is not removed, and we have a coordinated position on that situation, for that long, the confusion will continue to breed the kind of violence that will be, spilling out of hand. Okay.
Mr. Kesandu, good morning, sir. Thank you for calling in.
Uncle Yore, greet you. Good morning, Mr. Malaki.
Good morning.
Mr. Malaki, the reason behind the discordance you're talking about is just one thing. Simply because Mr. President has not come out on his own to give a position. This is something every Nigerian has been clamoring for. Mr. President should come out and talk to Nigerians and say, this is this. We want the open grazing, or you want to support it or you're against it. Let Mr. President speak. If at some point I'm beginning to think that Mr. President might not be aware of certain statements coming from Garbashev to a very large extent. People around him might be enforcing this whole decision, and they will not give it to Garbashev to speak on behalf of the president. And this is the reason why we must hear Mr. President directly. We voted for him. We did not vote for Garbashev to continue to speak for us every time. But like the open grazing thing, where on earth are people practicing open grazing? We have said it over and over again. Your cows will be fatter, bigger, and in ranching. You will get more meat. This will be better for you. You will not stress yourself going about places. And it has caused so much insecurity in the land. What is difficult about it to ban it? What I'm saying, that is what we're talking about restructuring. A particular section of the country is saying that this thing is not really good for them. It is causing confusion in their land. Why not respect them? If you come to my place in the Itubom, my local government, where I come from in Imo State, and say you want to buy land and do your business, if I choose to give you land and sell land to you, it's a different ballgame. So people should stop causing confusion with this thing. And God bless Akeredolu for standing firmly to that. It is irreversible, and we have said no to it. I urge us southern governors to enforce this thing in the various states. As I speak to you in my local government, this thing is happening. As I speak to you in Owerri Mental, it is happening. Why won't you people stop this whole thing? Mr. President, to speak to Nigerians. This is all we ask for. We are not asking for too much. Thank you very much.
Well said.
Indeed.
Well said. I'm happy you are concurring. Very well said. In short, even the Land Use Act, 1978, grants to the governors of the federating units the, if you like, ownership of these lands, of all the lands within their territory, apart from those at the Federal Capital Territory or controlled by its agencies. In short, the preamble, the introduction to that act itself and Section 1 is to that effect. So if that is true, then to what extent would you now continue to perpetrate your argument in conflict of the position of the law? I like the way you presented it, that look, this was perhaps the same position that the Attorney General had taken, literally and practically re-echoed by the spokesperson to the presidency. But I think that the point that the last speaker has made is that, come, wait a minute, Mr. President, you shouldn't wait until every Nigerian is killed on account of this indolence. You ought to come out and address the people who elected you and take a firm position on this. In doing that, yes, you cannot run away from what the position of the law says.
But we've heard from the presidential spokespeople that coming out and speaking directly, you know, whatever that means is not Mr. President's style. And so we have Adesina and Shehu. And when they have spoken,
so when this style is
we take it that the presidency
of course,
has spoken.
Particularly when there is no repudiation, it's almost like making a defamatory statement and there's no retraction. It will be taken that is what you said and you stand by it.
Okay, Ada in Jos. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Yori. Good morning to our guests there.
Sure.
Good morning.
I think the problem we are having is Mr. President doesn't have the political will to be decisive about this issue of herdsmen, you know, going about with the cattle. That's my own. That's the way I look at it. I'm appealing to Mr. President to detach himself from his tribe. He is supposed to be a national leader. He's not a tribal leader. Let me tell you something. All those his spokesmen that are talking, are you sure Mr. President is even aware of what they are talking? Okay, if he's not aware, then it means that whatever they say, they are representing him because they are working for him. They are I want to find out from your guests there. I know about the human rights and all that. I know about the right to basic things in life like food, life, education, shelter, freedom of speech, movement, and the rest of them. Even rights are not even absolute. Like if you take somebody's life, the government has the right to take your own life. Now that of movement, that's what is interesting me now because of the controversy. Please, the guests there, I want to find out from you, this right of movement, does it include the right of movement for the cattle on food? Please clarify us because the spokesperson of the president told us that the cattle have a right to be going about. I don't know what is happening. What is happening in Nigeria?
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay,
let's argue about this country.
Thank you very much for calling in. I appreciate your call. I think they themselves, perhaps anticipating this kind of a question, I began to talk about without prejudice. I think it is the pushback from the southern governors that without prejudice to the rights of people, this thing is good for our people. Nobody is trying to touch the rights of people to freedom of movement. Could you take it from there, please?
So it was clear. It was clear. What was banned is the movement of cattle from, around the southern Nigeria,
yes,
perpetrating criminally known activities, including malicious destruction, deliberate and intentional destruction of the property of other people.
Yes.
So,
and even when it is accidental,
intended, the destruction is the malfeasance that is condemned by so many acts, the criminal code, all of those.
And not all governors in the north are against it.
Correct.
You know, take the governor of Kano, for instance.
Governor of Kano,
he has spoken severally.
Ganduje came out and said, look, even to give effect to my intention, I am going to provide enough land to be able to introduce this ranching and so on and so forth. And the fact that that was re-echoed in a coordinated manner by the southern governors should not detract from what the consensus that has already been built.
Let's take this call from
Kano and these are all APC government, and I don't see the need for the confusion.
Indeed, sorry to have interrupted you. Sunday, Mr. Sunday Inewekoro, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Sir, Mr. Yori, you see, I don't really know what we are going to call this issue happening in our country right now. When I was going on, I'm a youth, when I was going on, we mingle with Fulani people. They marry our sisters then. We are living together. I'm talking about Yewa and Ogun State. But these days that they don't want to stay in a place, they don't want to maintain their region, they don't want to maintain their territory. They, as far, the way they are killing people now, I think the best thing is for them to stay on their own. That is the way I'm saying it.
Okay, thank you for calling in. But we see, we're not talking about that kind of a thing, about anybody staying on their own. And the point has been made that the right to freedom of movement is intact. It does not affect what we're talking about. However, there is no right to continually be destructive of our property in the South, and that is what needs to be examined, especially as nobody's saying that all herdsmen are renegade people, but enough of those people, enough incidents are happening for people to know that there's a problem here. And the only way to sort it out is, can we revert to some of the more intelligent suggestions that have been made? So it's a surprise to many people. Governor Otom, for instance, has said that, count us out. In our state, in Benue State here, count us out of all these things you're talking about. We have decided we are setting up a ranch, and we will do that to the best of our ability. So,
in any case, even the president, a few weeks, if not months ago, had given a shoot-on-sight order on any arm-bearing non-state actor who cannot justify the use of the arm. Why was that necessary? It was because it is partly traced to the recurrent incidents of violence perpetrated by so many people in the guise of rearing and herding cattle.
Thank you for reminding me about that shoot-at-sight order given by Mr. President.
So what is the confusion about?
Not that we have heard of any particular execution of that.
But the order was given.
But the order was given.
On purpose and for reason.
Nasir in Mowe, good morning.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, on this issue, I thank your guest. Honestly, what I would advise, Uncle Yori, take camera out to interview people outside there. I'm a lover of Mr. President. I voted for this government, and I have the right to speak out. What is happening, honestly, is high time Mr. President should speak up. He's our father. He's father of all nations. He owns everybody. I love him as a person. But what is happening now, honestly speaking, is nothing good to reckon with. I was once a child within this community. I lived in Surulere ab initio when I was a kid. We relate well with the Hausa Fulani. There are good ones amongst them. Why now, Uncle Yori? Why now? Why now? That's
all right, then. Thank you very much for calling in. Really appreciate your call, Nasir. I don't know. It is my feeling that, look, the time has come. We have heard Mr. President speaks when he wants to speak. And also when he chooses, apparently, he hands it over to Additional and Shehu, as the case may be, depending on the subject matter. But it seems that there's a call that, maybe, just maybe, somebody has suggested in the kind of opposition to the remark coming from Garba Shehu that they're not even sure that, Garba Shehu is speaking for Mr. President. That the way they see it, no. Mr. President has the interest of this country at heart, so something is amiss. Now, maybe it's not such a bad idea for Mr. President to come out and address us directly.
There are moments when silence is no longer golden. And this is one of such situations.
So we need to be hearing from the president.
I mean, if you hear callers after callers, you could hear people who are in pain and who are still in love of their president.
Yes.
In other words, our confidence and faith in this man to superintend the affairs of Nigeria at this material time has not waned. Yet, it is inexplicable, it cannot be understood why Mr. President would not find golden opportunities to galvanize his position, articulate it in a way that will go straight into the hearts of Nigerians that love him, and stop this burning of the goodwill that he has always had.
Exactly.
To what extent can you have a man who rose to power almost on the trust and confidence of the people, now squandering it because you have abdicated, that is the word, abandoned leadership to appoint us? I mean, for each time that Garba Shehu, with all due respect, or Adesina, speaks on national issues, for that long you diminish the importance that the people pay to it, and then create the kind of confusion that people do not want to forgive you for.
So people need to hear, even if Garba Shehu did indeed deliver the message accurately, it's a commentary that some are even suggesting that they're not sure Mr. Garba Shehu was speaking the president's mind. That itself speaks volumes. I don't know, because Mr. President can speak when he wishes to. I guess the long and short of all of this is that people need to be hearing this kind of a thing directly from the president. I wonder what happened to that whole matter about presidential chat, where this kind of a subject in the past would have been addressed.
That is even a reductionist position. Otherwise, what Nigerians need is the action. He ought to even visit some of these hotspots. He ought to interface with the people.
But we're
saying that the least he can do
we've been told that
is to speak to us.
We've been told that styles differ. And maybe that's what we're speaking on.
And I have also insisted there are moments when silence cannot amount to what do you call it?
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Malaki Ugumatu, legal practitioner and former national president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. And also thanks to our other human rights people, the Human Rights Advancement and Development and Advocacy Center that we spoke with earlier, Ayodele Amin and Michael O'Brien Onyeka. Thanks to them as well. And also thanks to you that called in on the program, offering your commentary on it. As we close now, we always do it when we always try to do it. Remind you about concerns on concerns on Boko Haram, yes, but I meant to say concerns on COVID-19. It's still out there. Observe all the protocols, please continue to do so. Wear your mask where necessary. Maintain the social distancing. Wash hands frequently. And certainly not the least, consider the vaccine, because not every Nigerian, and it's not just every Nigerian, it's around the world, there are still those who say, no thanks. Maybe you want to consider the vaccine. That's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folani. Bye-bye for now.